October 1944, Leyte Gulf. Lieutenant Cecil Harris reached into his flight suit and pulled out a single wooden matchstick. The other pilots in the ready room watched as he carefully taped the matchstick to the side of his gun sight, a tiny wooden splinter positioned exactly 3 inches from the center reticle. "What the hell is that for?" someone asked. Harris smiled. "That's how you kill zeros." The other pilots laughed. They'd heard Harris talk about his matchstick theory for months. Most thought it was superstition. Some thought he was crazy. Harris didn't argue. He just walked to his F-6F Hellcat and took off into the largest air battle of the Pacific War. 12 hours later, he landed with 11 confirmed kills. The next day, he did it again. 8 more. 19 Japanese aircraft destroyed in 48 hours. The highest 2-day kill count of any American pilot in the entire war. And all because of a wooden matchstick that cost less than a penny. The pilots who had laughed at Harris spent the rest of the war taping matchsticks to their own gun sights. They never laughed again. To understand what Harris discovered, you need to understand why American pilots were missing. Aerial gunnery is not like shooting a rifle. When you fire a rifle at a stationary target, you aim directly at it. The bullet goes where the barrel points, but in aerial combat, nothing is stationary. Your aircraft is moving at 300 miles per hour. The enemy aircraft is moving at 300 miles per hour. Both of you are maneuvering in 3 dimensions simultaneously. If you aim directly at a crossing target and fire, your bullets will arrive at the spot where the target was, not where it is. This is called deflection shooting. You have to aim ahead of the target, leading it like a hunter leads a flying duck. The mathematics are simple in principle. Calculate the target's speed, calculate its angle, calculate the distance, calculate the time your bullets will take to arrive. Aim at the spot where the target will be when the bullets get there. The mathematics are impossible in practice. In the chaos of a dogfight, you don't have time for calculations. You're pulling G-forces that drain blood from your brain. You're scanning for other threats. You're fighting your own aircraft. You have maybe 2 seconds to line up a shot before the target escapes. Most pilots solve this problem through instinct. They flew thousands of practice hours shooting at towed targets, developing a feel for deflection. Their brains learned to make the calculations unconsciously. This worked, sometimes, but instinct was unreliable. Under stress, under fear, under the chaos of combat, instincts failed. The result was abysmal hit rates. Studies after the war showed that the average fighter pilot used approximately 3,000 rounds of ammunition per kill. That's not 3,000 bullets per aircraft destroyed. That's 3,000 bullets that missed for everyone. That hit something vital. Most pilots never shot down anything at all. They flew mission after mission, fired thousands of rounds, and hit nothing but empty sky. Cecil Harris looked at those numbers and decided there had to be a better way. Harris had been a mathematics teacher before the war. He taught high school geometry in rural Ohio. He spent years explaining angles and distances to bored teenagers who didn't see the point. Now he was seeing the point. The deflection shooting problem was geometry. Pure, simple geometry. 2 objects moving through space, 2 vectors intersecting at a calculated point. The pilots who relied on instinct were solving geometry problems with their gut. Sometimes they got lucky. Usually they didn't. Harris decided to solve the problem with actual mathematics. He started by analyzing gun camera footage. The Navy filmed every combat engagement, and Harris spent weeks studying the results. He noticed a pattern. Successful kills almost always happened in a narrow band of conditions. The target was at a specific angle, roughly 30 to 45 degrees off the nose. The distance was specific, usually between 200 and 400 yards. The deflection angle was consistent. In other words, the geometry was repeatable. If he could create a simple reference system, something that told him exactly where to aim for a given angle and distance, he could eliminate the guesswork entirely. He experimented with marks on his windscreen, grease pencil lines at various angles, tape strips at measured distances. Nothing worked well enough. The marks were either too complex to use quickly or too simple to be accurate. Then he had his breakthrough. He was sitting in the ready room holding a matchstick when the idea hit him. The matchstick was exactly 2 inches long. At arm's length, the distance from his eye to the gun sight, That 2-inch matchstick covered a specific angular width. If he positioned the matchstick beside his gun sight, it would create a constant reference for deflection. Here's how it worked. When a zero was crossing in front of him at combat range, he would position the gun sight on the zero's nose. Then he would check how many matchstick widths the zero's tail extended beyond the sight. 1 matchstick width meant a specific deflection angle. 2 matchstick widths meant double that angle. Instead of guessing, he had a measuring tool. The matchstick became his deflection calculator. Here's what nobody understood about Harris's system. It wasn't magic, it wasn't luck, it wasn't superhuman reflexes. It was high school geometry applied under fire. Every other pilot was trying to develop instincts that took years to perfect. Harris built a tool that worked the first time he used it. And that tool was about to make him the deadliest pilot in the Pacific. Harris refined his technique over months of practice. He discovered that the matchstick worked best when positioned horizontally, exactly 3 inches to the right of his gun sight's center reticle. At that position, the matchstick measured roughly 15 degrees of deflection at combat range. For a zero crossing from right to left at 300 yards, if the zero's length equaled the matchstick, aim at the nose. If the zero extended 1 matchstick past the sight, lead by 1 matchstick width. If it extended 2 matchsticks, lead by 2. The system was crude. It didn't account for varying distances or speeds. It wasn't mathematically precise, but it was consistent. And consistency, Harris discovered, was more valuable than precision. A pilot using instinct might hit 30% of the time on a good day and 5% on a bad day. The variance was enormous. Harris, using his matchstick, hit about 25% of the time, every single time. No good days, no bad days. Just consistent, reliable accuracy. He practiced the technique obsessively. He would roll his Hellcat into a simulated attack run, identify the matchstick measurement, and immediately know where to aim. The process took less than a second. He learned to recognize standard crossing angles by how the zero's silhouette compared to his matchstick. A zero at 30 degrees looked different than a zero at 45 degrees. The matchstick told him which was which. The other pilots watched him practice and shook their heads. "You can't reduce dogfighting to a formula," they said. "It's all instinct, feel, experience." Harris didn't argue, he just kept practicing. By October 1944, he had flown 87 combat missions. His kill count was respectable. 4 confirmed victories. Good, but not exceptional. Then came Leyte Gulf. October 24, 1944, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The Japanese Navy launched its final desperate gamble, a massive offensive to destroy the American landing forces in the Philippines. Japanese carriers launched every available aircraft. Over 300 planes swarmed toward the American fleet in wave after wave. Harris's squadron was scrambled to intercept. The sky was chaos. Zeros, Judies, Kates, and Vals mixed with American Hellcats and Corsairs. Aircraft were falling in every direction, some Japanese, some American. The radio was a constant stream of screaming voices. Harris climbed above the melee and studied the battle. He saw what most pilots missed in the chaos: patterns. The Japanese were attacking in formations. They were following predictable flight paths toward the carriers. They weren't maneuvering randomly. They were flying relatively straight courses, perfect for deflection shooting. Harris rolled into his first attack. He picked a formation of 3 zeros escorting a group of dive bombers. He approached from their 7 o'clock, high and fast. As he closed, he watched the lead zero through his gun sight. The zero's silhouette was crossing from right to left. Its length extended approximately 1.5 matchsticks past his center reticle. 1.5 matchsticks, led by 1.5, and widths. Harris shifted his gun sight to empty air, the spot where the zero would be in half a second. He fired. The .650 caliber guns roared. Tracers streamed toward the empty space. The zero flew directly into the stream. The aircraft shuddered, then erupted in flames. It tumbled toward the ocean without the pilot ever seeing what hit him. First kill. 3 seconds. Harris didn't celebrate. He shifted to the second zero, still in formation, still processing what had happened to his leader. Matchstick measurement, 2 widths, Led by 2 matchsticks, fire, second kill, another 3 seconds. The third Zero finally reacted, braking hard left in a desperate evasive maneuver. Harris followed, recalculating on the fly. The turning Zero presented a different angle. Steeper deflection, closer range. He adjusted his aim based on the new matchstick reading. Fire. Third kill. 90 seconds since he'd begun his attack. 3 aircraft destroyed. Harris climbed back to altitude and found another formation. The battle lasted for hours. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft attacked the American fleet. Wave after wave was shredded by the defenders. Harris flew until his guns ran dry. He landed, rearmed, and took off again. Each engagement followed the same pattern. Find a target, measure with the matchstick, calculate the lead, fire. He wasn't faster than other pilots. He wasn't a better flyer. His aircraft was the same F-6F Hellcat that everyone else flew, but his hit rate was devastating. Other pilots fired long bursts, spraying bullets and hoping for hits. Harris fired short, precise bursts, exactly where his matchstick told him the target would be. He conserved ammunition. He made every bullet count. By the end of the first day, his gun camera footage showed 11 confirmed kills. 11 aircraft, 1 pilot, 1 day. The intelligence officers reviewing the footage couldn't believe what they were seeing. They watched Harris make shot after shot with mechanical precision. No wasted ammunition, no wild misses. "How is he doing this?" one officer asked. "Something about a matchstick," another answered. "He tapes a matchstick to his gun sight." The officers looked at each other. A matchstick. October 25th, 1944. The Japanese launched another massive strike. Harris was airborne before dawn. If anything, the second day was even more target-rich than the first. Japanese aircraft were everywhere, desperately trying to reach the American carriers, increasingly disorganized as their formations were torn apart. Harris worked through them methodically. He found a flight of Judy dive bombers and destroyed 3 in a single pass. He caught a Kate torpedo bomber at low altitude, measured the deflection, and put a burst through its engine. He dueled with a Zero that tried to get on his tail, using his Hellcat's superior dive speed to create distance, then reversing and catching the pursuing fighter with a matchstick-calculated shot. By noon, his kill count for the day stood at 6. He landed to refuel and rearm. His plane captain noticed the matchstick taped beside the gun sight. "Sir, what's that for?" Harris pulled off the old matchstick, worn and splintered from the cockpit vibrations, and replaced it with a fresh one. "That's my calculator." He took off again. The afternoon brought 2 more kills. The last one was a Zero that tried to escape by diving toward the ocean. Harris followed, measured the deflection, and fired a burst that set the engine on fire. The Zero crashed into the waves. 8 kills on the second day, 19 total in 48 hours. When Harris landed for the final time, the deck crew surrounded his aircraft in stunned silence. No American pilot had ever achieved such a 2-day total. The record would stand for the rest of the war. Word of Harris's matchstick technique spread through the fleet like wildfire. Pilots who had mocked him for months now demanded to learn his system. Squadron commanders ordered classes on deflection calculation. The simple wooden matchstick became the most discussed piece of equipment in naval aviation. Harris taught anyone who asked. He explained the geometry. He demonstrated the measurement technique. He showed pilots how to calibrate their own matchsticks for their own gun sights. The results were immediate. Kill rates in squadrons that adopted the matchstick technique improved by 40% within weeks. Pilots who had flown dozens of missions without a kill suddenly started scoring. The Navy took notice. By early 1945, deflection shooting aids were being incorporated into official training programs. The matchstick evolved into more sophisticated systems, adjustable rings, calculated reticles, and eventually the computing gun sights that would become standard in jet aircraft. But it all started with a wooden splinter taped beside a gun sight. A mathematics teacher from Ohio had solved a problem that trained combat instructors had struggled with for years. He didn't have better reflexes. He didn't have more experience. He just had a better system. Cecil Harris finished the war with 24 confirmed kills. He was one of the highest-scoring Navy aces of the Pacific. He received the Navy Cross, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and multiple air medals. After the war, he returned to Ohio. He taught mathematics for another 30 years, explaining angles and distances to students who still didn't see the point. But sometimes, when a student complained that geometry was useless, Harris would smile. "Let me tell you about a matchstick," he would say. The matchstick technique didn't survive unchanged. Technology evolved. Computing gun sights replaced wooden splinters. Modern fighters use radar-guided missiles that calculate deflection automatically. But the principle remains the same. The pilot who can reduce chaos to calculation will always defeat the pilot who relies on instinct alone. Harris understood this in 1944 when everyone else was still guessing. He turned a 2-inch piece of wood into 19 kills. He proved that sometimes the simplest solution is the deadliest, and he showed that a high school math teacher could be the most dangerous man in the sky. The pilots who laughed at Harris's matchstick called it superstition. They said aerial combat couldn't be reduced to formulas. They said instinct was everything. Then they watched him shoot down 19 aircraft in 2 days while they struggled to hit anything at all. The matchstick wasn't magic. It was mathematics. It was the recognition that dogfighting wasn't mystical. It was geometry. It was the willingness to solve a problem that everyone else thought couldn't be solved. Harris didn't have supernatural abilities. He had a splinter of wood and the knowledge of how to use it. Sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes the weapon that costs nothing is worth more than the weapon that costs everything. And sometimes the man with the matchstick is the most dangerous man in the sky. If this story of mathematical genius and combat innovation gripped you, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel uncovers the untold stories of World War II, the simple solutions to impossible problems, the tricks that changed everything, and the warriors who thought differently. Tap the bell so you never miss an upload, and drop a comment below. I want to know, would you have trusted a matchstick calculation in combat, or relied on instinct? Share this video with someone who appreciates real military history. And check out the video on screen right now for another story of unconventional tactics that won the war. I'll see you in the next one.